Good evening, Dungeon Masters. I'm Baldur. A few months ago, I posted a video that detailed how the broad adoption and constraining nature of a video game-esque virtual tabletop would limit player creativity while gaming, would poorly educate players of the mechanics of the game itself, and that Wizards of the Coast's VTT platform is really just a ploy to build a moat around their RPG walled garden, designed to entrap gamers into a flashy yet uncreative virtual experience. And then, Larian Studios released Baldur's Gate 3, and this might be a full-on checkmate, not just for the VTT, but for the entirety of the D&D leadership at Wizards of the Coast. One of the things I discussed in my prior VTT critique video was how the user interface of the virtual tabletop would likely limit the creative use of, as well as the understanding of, the 5th edition mechanics and character options for both new and casual users. Judging from a number of Dungeon Masters experiences with players that use D&D Beyond at the table, the casual player's ability to understand or recall the rules without the D&D Beyond app once they've grown accustomed to using that app is basically null. I asserted that the VTT would exacerbate this problem further by keeping all the math core crunch of the game even further out of view of the player in order to focus on the gameplay itself. But then Baldur's Gate 3 came along and turned the dice rolling mechanics into a fun minigame. The dice rolling screen during skill tests and the heads up display notifications during combat implicitly teach players not just what bonuses they're getting to their rolls, but why they're getting them. Players are rewarded therefore with bonuses as they learn that sneaking to high ground or cover during combat will give them advantage on attacks, or that by having a cleric cast guidance on a skill test grants a plus 1d4 bonus to dice rolls. Further, so many of the in-game world objects are interactive, complete with mouse over menus that invite players to do that interaction, that they encourage tricksy use of the environment with attacks and spellcasting. As a result, players who embark on a Baldur's Gate 3 campaign will likely rack up 100 hours of gameplay while getting handheld tutelage on the intricacies of 5e mechanics, and will come away from the experience with a number of learned creative uses for spells and class abilities. Users who play the game for just a few hours a night in a span of 2 months will rack up as much game time as a typical 6-month tabletop campaign, but will have far deeper understanding of 5e mechanics than casual tabletop players thanks to the constant feedback provided in the gaming experience. As a result, our real world is about to have a cadre of players who, after completing the Baldur's Gate 3 campaign, will be entirely fluent in the mechanics of 5th edition. Now, sure, there are definitely downsides to learning the rules this way, and those downsides will most likely present themselves as a rebranding of the old standby Matt Mercer effect. Nobody's tabletop game will ever replicate the flashy experience of the Baldur's Gate video game, just as it can't replicate the professional voice actors playing via live stream. However, the opportunities to play mid-level or even high-level D&D with people who are deeply familiar with the rules and mechanics, understand how their character options work, and have already put in the reps to learn what kinds of things their characters can do in different situations, especially in combat, will radically speed up the game at the table. While I am a huge fan of older editions of D&D and various retro clones, like Basic and Expert Edition or Shadow Dark, in part for their ease of teachability, I absolutely love playing high-level 5th edition campaigns because of the stacks of nonsense-filled kitchen sinks I can throw at the players. When characters are as powerful as demigods, Dungeon Masters can truly get creative with adventure design. But this high-level gameplay requires extremely experienced players who thoroughly know the rules and who can contribute just as much to the pacing of the game as the DM who adjudicates it. But wait a minute, isn't WotC about to change all of the rules? Wizards of the Coast inadvertently did a huge service for Larian Studios by offering up the $350 million required to produce a brand awareness movie for the Baldur's Gate 3 release. But in the time period between now and the next Tabletop Edition's launch date, a whole new swath of players that might be interested in trying D&D, both at the table or via virtual tabletop, may be shocked to learn that by the time they get a gaming group together and settle on a date for Session 0, people will be showing up to the game possibly even unknowingly, with different editions of the rules, all thanks to the ludicrously confusing marketing about the different versions of 5th edition. Sure, the gameplay mechanics are supposed to be backward compatible between the two different editions, but the class abilities and magic spells are all currently in the process of being reworked. All of the rules training these new Baldur's Gate players are working through right now will be rendered inert by WotC's publication of the new edition's character options. Maybe the new VTT will do its best to online both new players and players who are converting from the Baldur's Gate platform. But if these Baldur's Gate players are going to try D&D in a VTT, are they really going to migrate away from a D&D platform they already own and convince all of their friends to migrate with them and pay for a more expensive product with inferior gameplay and unfamiliar rules?
Probably not. They're more likely to mod Baldur's Gate 3.
6 months. That's how long it will take. While Larian Studios states that they don't have a project in scope to create a dungeon mastering system within the Baldur's Gate platform, they already are ramping up modding support for the game. And if the Divinity engine, the modding software created for the Divinity series, is any kind of predictor, it's quite likely that modding support for Baldur's Gate 3 will be equally robust. Baldur's Gate already has the show-stopping hard stuff built in, like networking for multiplayer, and will very likely have character and dungeon design tools, asset managers, and anything else a dungeon master would need in order to run a game. The only thing that is missing is a dungeon master's user interface to manage the elevated permissions required for DM-specific interactions, like overriding player camera views for dialogue-based NPC encounters, drag-and-drop pre-designed combatant groups, and an asset manager for quest-based assets. The moment a fan-made interface is robust enough to merely challenge the quality of the official Wizards of the Coast virtual tabletop, which according to public gameplay releases won't seem very difficult to do, the 8 million players currently enthralled with Baldur's Gate 3, who according to Forbes is half the size of the 5e player base, will very likely just use a modded BG3 instead. In February of last year, Renegade Game Studios, the same studio that created the latest edition of Vampire the Masquerade and the Axis and Allies board games, released the G.I. Joe RPG. Renegade has further created many other Hasbro licensed RPGs like the Transformers RPG, the Power Rangers RPG, and will soon release the game highly anticipated by bronies everywhere, the My Little Pony RPG. So what exactly are Hasbro's boards of directors thinking when they watch the staff at Wizards of the Coast, who are far more expensive than a Renegade Studios licensing contract, steer the brand into uncharted territory as D&D book sales slump over, and while a licensed video game product that started production in 2017 cannibalizes their own VTT before it even gets off the ground? This should be a massive red flag to the writing staff of Wizards of the Coast. If I were Chris Perkins and I wanted to continue writing for D&D's future content, I would be attending social mixers at Renegade Game Studios. While it might be clearly apparent to D&D fans that Wizards of the Coast's leadership has no understanding of or respect for the product's fanbase, failing to prevent a licensed product like Baldur's Gate 3 from directly competing with WotC business strategy will only have Hasbro board of directors sitting up and taking notice. If D&D is truly as undermonetized as Cynthia Williams claims, it's only because Wizards of the Coast's leadership is holding it back from becoming a well-managed licensing engine. Instead, it's just far too obsessed with warping the game into a microtransaction machine that nobody will want to use anyway. Why spend $70 on a VTT that has a worse experience than what players can get from a modded version of a cheaper game they already own? If you'd like to help me make more content like this in the future, please consider supporting me on Patreon or becoming a channel member. Thanks for watching, Dungeon Masters, and until next time, good night. G.I. Joe!